So this is Aubrey Serfling. Yeah, he's my uncle, someone that I look up to and admire. We've definitely had our fun run-ins over the years, but to be standing here with him today is a very, very special moment for me. And I feel like the education he's going to provide for you is extremely, extremely valuable. He's the CEO of Eisenhower Medical Center. He's been there for almost 20 years, and he's, is this your last year?
It's my last year.
This is his last year, and in his tenure as CEO, he's done wonderful things at the hospital. Expanded it to many locations and raised almost $1 billion in donations so that the hospital can make more of an impact. So please give a warm multiple club welcome to Aubrey Serfling.
So I'd like to start off with a few stories about Nick.
Yes,
Please do. Please, that'd be great.
So actually, that's the irony of this. Is my first question actually is, did you ever think you would be sitting here doing this with me?
There really isn't anything, Nick, that would involve you that would surprise me. So that was yes, it was possible.
Yeah. No, I
Here in Rancho Mirage, probably not.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, again, just man to man and nephew to uncle, it means the world that you could be here and took time out of your schedule.
Thanks.
So, and I know it means a lot to all these people. Can you guys hear okay back there?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, great. All right, so if you could just give us your background and the road to becoming the CEO of Eisenhower Medical.
How far back do you want to go?
How far back you guys want to go?
Where do you think is the most important? Your biggest pivot point?
Yeah, maybe some of the biggest changes and pivot points that led to you becoming the CEO.
I guess I'll go all the way back to childhood for just a couple sound bites. Because I was born and raised on a farm in Iowa. And my dad's property was both in Iowa and Minnesota. And so I went K through 6 in Minnesota, and I went to a one-room country schoolhouse, and the only person in my class was my cousin Sonia.
Oh my gosh.
And from there, here I am today. One other story, and then we'll kind of fast forward, is my dad loved to play games, and the loser got stuck with work. And remember, I'm on a farm. So one night, dead of winter, snowing, blizzard outside, maybe in the 8th grade, maybe a freshman, kind of in that age. And I was playing cards with my dad and lost, and I got up and started to get dressed to go out and milk. We had a small group of cows, and I went going out. My mom came in and said to my dad, "Well, you're not going to make him go out there alone tonight. There's a blizzard out there." And I'll never forget, my dad had one of these Barca lounger chairs with a lever. He pulled the lever up with his feet. He reached for his Reader's Digest and L&M cigarettes, and he turned and looked at my mom and said, "He lost, didn't he?"
So do you think that was pivotal in your work ethic?
I think it is. You kind of learn that you losing is not fun. Winning is a lot more fun. So
Amen.
anyway, then kind of fast forwarding, I went to the University of Iowa and got a business degree there. And it was during the whole Vietnam era. And so when I graduated, I guess it was called 2S or 4S, whatever the student exemption was, got drafted and went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then went to White Sands Missile Range to become an M60 machine gunner. Oh yeah. So, but one night, just having a beer with a few guys, one of the guys worked in personnel, and he said, "You have a college degree?" And I said, "Well, of course I do." He said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I just got drafted like everyone else." He said, "Well, can you type?" And I said, "Well, of course I can type." 2 weeks later, I had what's called my military occupational status, MOS, changed to clerk typist, got shipped out to White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. So I never had to go to Vietnam, just by a stroke of luck. And then my very best friend there was a guy that had worked for International General Electric. And we were going to get out about the same time, and he said, "Where are you going to go?" And I said, "Well, Harry, heard you talk about New York City. Sounds really exciting. And you were also in San Francisco. And he said, Aubrey, I don't think you're ready for New York City yet. Why don't you try San Francisco? I went home, packed my bags, and much to my family's dismay, headed to San Francisco. Didn't know anybody, didn't know a soul. Went out there and got a job for 18 months working for Del Monte. And I worked in their operations research department on the tomato pack model. And it was amazing to me because every single pallet that comes off the field, they test different things about the tomatoes, and then they would say, this one goes to 39 Fruitvale for whole stewed tomatoes, this one goes here for that, and different things. But it didn't take me long to figure out, this is not how I'm going to spend my life. So what do? You go back to graduate school. And so I went back to graduate school and got an MBA at Berkeley. And you didn't really have to do a thesis, but you had to do a major project. And there was this 3x5 card over in Barrows Hall that this hospital in San Francisco wanted to know, should they lease or buy their radiology equipment? And I went, well, I can analyze that. There's nothing to that. So I went over and got involved in this project. And I started thinking, I never even thought about who runs a hospital. And I just kind of going, this really seems like it's something that I might really be interested and motivated in. So I went back and got a second master's degree from Berkeley in hospital administration, and then was hired by the hospital that I'd done this project for. And the CEO was a guy named Dr. Bruce Spivey, who's still in San Francisco. And I was the director of financial planning. This is my entry-level job. So I've maybe been there a year, maybe a year and a half. And I remember the first year I was there, I worked 365 days straight.
Wow.
I went in on Christmas, I went in on New Year's, I went in every single day for at least a certain amount of time. So Bruce calls me in and he goes, you're the only guy over there that I can talk to. And I said, well, what do you mean, Bruce? He said, you can translate for me. They bring in all these spreadsheets and all these reports, and I have no idea what they mean or but you say, look, this is what it means. This is what we need to be thinking about. This is what you need to be thinking about. So I'm out of college now, maybe 2 years. He said, how would you like to be the chief financial officer? I said, of course. And we laugh about it to this day because I go, Bruce, that is the most reckless and irresponsible decision you ever made. I was so unqualified to do that. He said, hey, it worked out, didn't it?
Absolutely.
So I became the CFO and then later the executive vice president and then ultimately the chief executive officer there. Bruce went on to be the head of Northwestern Healthcare Network in Chicago and then got recruited back to New York City. And so he kept trying to convince Lori and I, come back here, I got a good job for you. We went, why would we want to leave California? And I'll be darned if we didn't go back there. And there was a joint venture between Columbia University and Cornell's medical school called Columbia Cornell Care. And so I became the chief operating and chief financial officer of that. And we lived 6 years, Midtown Manhattan, right over by the UN. And then it was, I don't know if any of you are from California or if a lot of you are from California. Stanford and UCSF tried to merge their medical schools and it just didn't work. It was oil and water. And eventually what happened here is the two medical schools decided to pull this thing apart and go their own separate way. And that's when I was footloose and fancy free on a severance agreement and got the interview here at Eisenhower. And I went, wow, this place is pretty simple compared to where I'm coming from. And so that moved here in 2000. So maybe that's enough of the history, and I know you have other questions.
Yeah, no, that was perfect context. So, and it leads to my next question is, what do you think attracted Eisenhower to you specifically as their CEO, their board of directors looking at you, Aubrey Serfling, saying, this is our guy for the next 20 years?
I think that our board, pretty much without exception, are very successful retired executives. They're not really, well, there's maybe one or two that are still running a company. One is a guy named Greg Rinker, and he's the head of Guthrie Rinker, but most of them are retired. So I think probably the education, the fact, the New York experience, that I've been a CEO before for a number of years, and we just clicked. And so kind of going forward a little bit, when I hadn't been there probably more than 6 months, in a board meeting, I said, I think I know what the mission statement is. And I think everybody wondered what I was going to put on the screen or the sheet of paper I was going to hand out. I said, I can say it in one sentence, but we should talk about it differently publicly. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, the one sentence is I've listened to the history of Eisenhower, the Annenbergs, the Firestones, the Hopes, all these families that started it. The unwritten mission statement was build a hospital that's good enough for me. And I said, I know what that looks like. I know how to do that. And never apologize for it, because that benefits every single person that walks through the door.
Absolutely.
It's not going to just benefit the rich and famous. We don't want to say it that way publicly. We want to talk about quality. We want to talk about different things. And away we went, and 20 years later, here I am.
Beautiful. So just so they have some context, how big is your organization in the form of revenue, if you look at it that way, and also in the scope of people?
I guess we'd be what you call probably a medium-sized company. We're just under $1 billion in revenue or sales, and we employ a little over 4,000 people. So
medium-sized company. Yeah.
I want to be a medium-sized.
And you also are involved with the Betty Ford Clinic as well, correct?
They merged with a kind of mirror image of themselves called Hazleton in Minnesota. I was on the board for a number of years, but just this last year finally stepped down, and I worked on that merger.
So just to give you guys some context, when President Gerald Ford passed away, he lives here in the Valley. Aubrey was the first phone call that they got, and he went over there. So, and Greg Rinker of Guthrie Rinker, they're behind Proactive, all the Tony Robbins tapes. So these are the type of people that founded the hospital, which he's saying is, in the modest way, medium-sized company. But just to give you guys some scope on that. So here's a two-part question. Did you have a specific vision? You kind of touched on it there, but if you could elaborate. Coming into your role as a CEO, and do you feel you've been successful in accomplishing it?
If I had to pick one insight that made a huge difference was on the financial side, where's the capital going to come from? And after working in New York City and seeing what money can buy, I just kind of had the insight, because of all these gated communities out here with all these extremely wealthy people, there's the market. And if we can satisfy them, we'll satisfy everybody that lives here. And I came up with what I called, in my mind, a 3-step sales process. First of all, almost all of them, this isn't their real home. It's their winter home. Their real home is Seattle. Their real home is Chicago. Their real home is Denver. Their real home is Portland. So they really didn't see Eisenhower as their hospital. But they're here for maybe 4, 5, 6 months. So they they're concerned, what happens if something happens to them here? So I set up this program. It's called the 24/7 program, and I know how to take care of rich people as well as anybody you will ever meet. I currently have 20 nurses and a manager that report directly to me as CEO, and the answer is always yes, and we figure out how to do it later. And so step one was what they were buying was an insurance policy. What would happen to them if something went wrong here? And they wanted to know that they had access to the guy at the top, somebody that could take care of them, somebody that could get them to the right doctor, somebody that could help them when they're in the emergency room. And they just bought an insurance policy. Step number 2 in the sales process was they started coming and getting just some basic services. And I remember one of the guys up at the Vintage one night, I was over there for dinner. He's trying to remember the name of the program, and he said, oh, hell, I just call it the Nurse at the Curb program.
The Nurse at the Curb.
And so when you arrive, there's one of these 24/7 nurses waiting for you. They'll personally escort you. If you're in the emergency room, we'll get you back in the treatment rooms quickly. And I had a run-in with the emergency room doctors when I was first there. And I said, okay, guys, you want me to believe that if a best friend of yours is coming over here, they're going to go sit and wait in the lobby and wait their turn. I said, I know that isn't what happens. So look at it this way. Those are your friends. The donors are my friends, and we're going to treat all our friends the same. So the entry level in this program isn't a huge amount of money. It's $250,000, but it started to get people involved. And they started then to go, well, maybe I should have a doctor up here. Maybe this, maybe that. And over time, we've really developed a huge group of very loyal donors from that one program. We've raised over $600 million from that one program.
Wow.
Because when they started to be involved and become loyal, then they started giving millions. So we really built on that and built a reputation, and that really gave us the capital to do things that we never could have dreamed of without that. And you're right, we've since I came, we're just under $1 billion that we've raised in philanthropy.
It's amazing. That's amazing. Good for you, little plug. So, knowing that you're speaking to sort of a broad audience, but CEOs and owners nonetheless, and you're around lots of CEOs or former CEOs, in your opinion, what's the primary function and role of a CEO for an organization?
I think I'll say it's hard to generalize, because if you're in the middle of a merger or in an industry that's consolidating, that role might be very different than if you're in a situation like I'm in.
Right.
So you're in different situations. I think my strength for this organization has been, and I've really always been this way, even as a kid. I think in the future tense. When I come into work, I don't even know what my schedule is. I don't even give a shit what it is. I mean, I have a secretary, a handler, a manager. I don't think about the day that much. I've got a wonderful chief operating officer, chief financial officer. But my mind, when I'm standing in the shower in the morning or doing what I'm doing, is always what's over the hill, what's the future. And have been pretty good at looking at today and figuring out, is that going to move us forward to that future, or is it going to cause trouble? I guess I would say strategic thinking has probably been my strength. Number 2, we all have these saying as managers, but we're completely, I have one of the few hospitals in California that have a completely non-union workforce, and have a great relationship with the employees, and we need to keep it that way. And I remember telling a story once. I was coming in and going to a management meeting, and here's this housekeeper, back door by ICU, down on her hands and knees, cleaning the threshold. I come in, she looks up, I say, good morning. She looks at me and says, good morning, Aubrey. And I said, this is what success looks like. She feels totally comfortable in saying that to me. And what that does for me is I get to know what's going on in the organization.
All the way down to the floor.
All the way down to the floor. Because they aren't afraid of me. I'm on a first name basis. I'm not a mister. So the employees, I've got a great relationship, and all the people that I've recruited over the years have that exact same philosophy.
That's beautiful, because my next question was, so you're running an organization of 4,000 people. How important are the people, and how granular do you get?
Some people say, well, what's your organization structure? And they think hierarchy. I go, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And you get the people in the room who have a pretty good knowledge of what the problem is and maybe what to do about it. So I jump hierarchies. The people that work for me jump hierarchies. I'm not hierarchical at all. So to me, an organization is a network. And you draw on the network based on what you're trying to get done, the problem you're trying to solve, the issue. So we're not at all hierarchical. And it's not just me, it's kind of the whole management group are that way.
That's beautiful.
And we work incredibly well together.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love that story. So your role as a CEO, specifically of Eisenhower, involves a lot of fundraising. The hospital needs to raise funds. So you're in this valley of mass influence and mass wealth. The people that you come across that are your large donors that you would describe as successful, and you're successful in your own right, is there anything that you can say they all have like the same trait that you could attribute their success to?
Well, that's a tough one because the most successful are, I think in many ways, kind of march to the tune of a different drummer. They're really almost unique individuals. I mean, and I don't think I'm sharing anything I shouldn't like. Dennis Washington is one of our major donors. Dennis is listed in Forbes as 40-some billion. And Dennis is shy. I remember when we were first here, Lori and I went into a party, and there was Dennis, and I introduced myself and was standing and talking to him, and I said, gee, Dennis, I didn't mean to monopolize you. He said, don't go. He said, when I go to a party, I just like to find a person to talk to and just leave everyone else alone. Now, here's a guy worth $44 billion. And then I can think of other people that are incredibly outgoing, incredibly gregarious, marketers, natural. They're unique individuals, I would say. I don't see something, they're all driven, of course.
Yeah.
That's something they have in common, and they're all smart.
Right. So why do you think people of great affluence and wealth are driven towards philanthropy? You know, it seems to be sort of a trend. You get rich and then you sort of give it all away. Where do you believe that comes from?
Well, one of it is they like the tax deductions.
I was just going to say that. That's honest right there.
That's a big one right there. And I think number two, they don't want to give it to the government. They would rather direct it themselves. Right. So they set up a private foundation, a family foundation. I mean, Dennis has got almost $1 billion in his family foundation. And he wants to direct where that money goes. He doesn't want to give it to the U.S. government and let them direct it. He wants to make the decisions himself. So I think they want to be able to guide it to the things that they're interested in and care about the most.
I love it. I love it. I love it, being sort of in control. That's why they're an entrepreneur to begin with. Just how impactful are those donations to the hospital? I know we hear this number of $1 billion and all that kind of stuff, but maybe can you quantify what that money has done for you in the hospital?
Well, one thing, the only financial disadvantage we have is we're basically a Medicare hospital. Medicare pays only about half of what commercial insurance pays. And a lot of people don't understand in this country, business pays probably anything from 75 to 100% more than the cost of what they're buying to cover the shortfall in Medicare, Medicaid, uninsured, emergency rooms. So there's a massive social transfer payment that's happening every year in this country where business and industry is covering the shortfall in these government programs. But they're loath to have a government-run system. So they would rather do that than see the government take it over and have a single-payer system. But that's really a major source of capital for us. So we've become a teaching hospital. We now have a residency training program where we have about 130 residents. We've got, I think, some of the latest equipment, and we have an employed medical group now that employs almost 300 doctors. And we just couldn't recruit the kind of talent that we recruit if we didn't have that extra money to work with.
Beautiful, beautiful. So what would be your greatest lesson if you could distill down your 20 years as CEO? And I know it's kind of on the spot question, but what's the greatest lesson you learned in your tenure as CEO of Eisenhower?
Well, we talked about, kind of the marketing, the fundraising side. But boy, if you can get a team together that really like to work together, that trust each other, where you're not looking over your shoulder and worried about any of that. And I've got probably the best team I've had in my entire career right now. And I just trust them, they trust me. We're completely open, there's no secrets, and they're very different, but each of them, think of it like a coach, where, the quarterback is a different position than the tight end. So they're not clones of one another. As a matter of fact, they're quite different, but they're all in the right position. And when I think about the lineup, I go, is there anybody in the lineup that I'd like to change? And the answer is not one single person.
That's beautiful.
And that is hard work, but there's an element of just flat out good luck in that as well. I mean, it is so hard to get a team that can function like that.
Yeah. Well, it takes the right leader as well to bring them all together. That's beautiful. So, if you could, we've got 23 to 60 in this group, right? All CEOs. If you could give them one piece of advice that you wish you had as an early CEO, what would that be?
Well, I don't know. Let's see, kind of looking back and saying, Dr. Spivey, the guy I mentioned, one of the things he told me, and it took me a while to do this, is he said, Aubrey, you're lucky because you're smart, but you see the answer before the organization is ready for it. And sometimes you got to just slow down and you got to pay attention to what the organization is ready to do. And there's the old saying, culture eats strategy. And you can have the best strategy, but if you start running afoul with the culture, you got to figure out how you're going to manage that. And so when I was young, I think I went too fast and got frustrated because I wasn't as aware as I should be of where the organization was and just how much change it could tolerate. and when it was willing to tolerate it, and when you were in a place to move forward. So I tended to kind of run roughshod.
You think just candidly and vulnerably, like there was any ego being younger that you wanted to kind of, we're going to do this with or without you type of thing, or?
Well, I think I don't know if it was so much ego driven as it was. Well, I figured this out. This is what we need to do, but maybe I'm dealing with some 65-year-old doctor that has been in the organization for a long time, and he's thinking, "Fuck you."
you young whippersnapper.
So you gotta look at your audience out there and go kind of, how fast can we move? And I can't even imagine what it must be to be like in the high-tech industry or something, because I'm in a very different kind of organization.
Sure. So when the final day comes and you're in your beautiful backyard having your morning coffee, and you look at your 20 years as CEO of Eisenhower specifically, what's the thing you'll be the most proud of?
Well, I would say taking an organization that was a sleepy little lazy organization. When I came in my first year, I fired everybody with one person because I went, they're not strivers. I mean, I cannot get to where I want to get because they're content to just be mediocre. And I am not willing to do that. So I think just that constant progress towards that vision has been something I'd be very proud of. By the way, my wife Lori very well.
Yes.
She's your aunt. And
Know her well.
yeah, she goes, her worst fear is my retirement.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
One of the doctors at the hospital told me his wife said to him when he was getting ready to retire, "I married you for better or worse, but not for lunch."
That's great.
Oh, poor Laura. Don't worry. We'll take care of her.
Yeah.
So as you kind of head into this twilight, how involved are you in hiring the successor?
I'll be very involved, and honestly, the board has absolute trust in me, and I'll probably pretty much name them. They might surprise me, but I don't think so. And I've an executive vice president that's worked for me for 12 years, and he should succeed me.
Beautiful.
That's what I think.
And if that person you have in mind that you just mentioned, are they similar in traits to you, or are you looking for someone kind of totally different and fresh?
Our values are very similar. The only thing that I've cautioned Marty, that's his name, is I said, "Marty, you are the best chief operating officer I've ever had, but that's not the job. And letting go of something you love isn't easy." So he's going to have to hire a replacement.
Right.
And I went, "Marty, and you have to hire a replacement. And are you sure you want to give that up? Because I know you love being a chief operating officer." And he goes, "No, I'm ready." I said, "Well, I'm going to be watching you."
Yeah.
Because letting go of something that you love is hard, especially if you're really good at it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he's very good at it.
That's sage
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
When people say Aubrey Serfling in the circles of philanthropy and the halls of the hospital and the ER rooms, how do you want them to remember you as the CEO for your time?
We talked about, I think, kind of the visionary thing, but I think if you were to ask people at the hospital, pretty much through and through, they'd say, "I'm a really great guy. I'm a good person. I've got good values. I don't lie to you. I give it to you straight. I don't play any games. It doesn't mean you always get to hear what you want to hear, but there's no monkey business like that. Real kind of the Iowa farm boy in me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You've wanted to retire for a few years, so you still think that farm boy is alive and the work ethic?
probably not. No, I'm looking to. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been a CEO for 30 years. I worked in healthcare for 47 years. I'm going to have to retool myself, and I don't know what that's going to be. But I'm going to come up with something.
Yeah.
I've had some ideas that I'm thinking about.
Is there any part of that that kind of terrifies you, or are you still in that future forward mentality?
No, it doesn't terrify me at all. Actually, I'm honestly looking forward to it in the sense that, being responsible for 4,000 employees and 300 doctors and $1 billion budget, I'm kind of ready.
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm just sort of ready. And in January 16th, I'll turn 76.
Wow.
A lot of people don't. I don't look that old. I don't think most people think I would. But I go, it's time.
Yeah.
Wow.
76.
Wow.
23.
Wow. Generational wealth right here.
Yeah, you got a ways to go.
Got a ways to go, but when you love what you do,
Yeah.
right, it's like the
And
clock.
I really, I did. I really love what I do.
Wow.
Beautiful. Well, now, do you have any questions of me?
I don't think in this setting.
Let's hear it. Shoot him straight.
So tell me a little bit about the group and what you're doing. 'Cause
Yes.
I don't really know that.
Yeah, so, the popular phrase that rolls around is mastermind, right? It was made popular by Napoleon Hill. Surround yourself with like-minded people that will push you. But essentially, this is a group of entrepreneurs from multiple industries all over the world, really. We've got somebody from the UK via Dubai and Mexico.
Wow.
And we have this principle about driving enterprise value, right? And really having a meaningful exit someday for their business so that they can be philanthropic. They can go invest into other companies. But the foundation of all of that, we believe, is rooted in what we call IV, which is interpersonal value creation. How you view yourself, your daily habits, what you put in your body, what you put in your mind, the
Right.
people you associate yourself with. And so this group is about giving the person to their left and their right permission to think and dream bigger, to not have shame over their failures, because we all have them. And ultimately what we're looking for is we're looking to invest in a handful of these individuals, all of them if we can. But it really won't be up to us, because the person we're investing in is the person that we see investing the most in themselves.
Yeah.
And so we're just, I've got a little bit of salt and pepper in the beard, and I'm not a 27-year-old kid with a Ferrari anymore. And so I'm using that wisdom from the past, along with my partners and coaches and mentors, to help guide these people down a path that we've been down multiple times. And then we also have people on board that have done more than we have, right?
So has this evolved and built over a period of several years?
Well,
6 months ago.
Not even.
no. So, really, truth be told, Aubrey, this has been a vision of mine for a long time. You talk about thinking
I know that.
forward, and it took kind of losing everything again to really think about what I wanted to do, and this was it. And so we launched this, and we started working on it in July, and we launched it kind of par baked in September. We officially launched in November, and this is our first quarterly event.
Wow, really?
And
Good.
so far so good.
Yeah.
So I want to open it up to Q&A. We've got only a few more minutes with Aubrey, but you guys want to ask any question? Yep, I knew you were going to be
I
first.
got a bunch of questions. That
Okay, you got one, and we'll come back to you. And then I saw Harry's
I
hand.
get-
Who else? So just so I can get a
My first question for you. So when I sense your presence, I feel trustworthiness, and to me, I see a great integration of character and competence. And usually, with the word trust, because of who you are, and again, I don't know what your values are, and all I know is what Nick and what you share. What did you do to build your own character and competence to take on the responsibility and the roles that you've embraced?
I would say I was very lucky on the character front because of I grew up in a poor but very normal family. I mean, I had a father and mother and brother. We were a very loving family. We were very close. And I don't take that for granted, especially in this day and age. So I grew up in a very secure environment, a very loving environment. And I think that kind of set me on my path in terms of that, and was very lucky in terms of that. I don't know if that answers your question.
How did you develop the skill set, the competence to take on the roles and responsibilities that you've embraced?
Well, that really came both through education and experience.
Gotcha.
Just the school of hard knocks and learning along the way.
Got it.
That's what this is. This is a giant school of hard knocks right here.
Yep. Thank you.
Sorry.
Harry,
Yeah, you mentioned when you were younger you wanted to go like faster than maybe the organisation could cope with. I relate to that 'cause I'm 23 and I want everything done like yesterday. How do you kind of gauge where the organisation is at and how fast it can go, basically?
did you guys hear the question?
Yeah,
Perfect.
great question.
Great question, Harry.
I think the answer to that is it just gets back to the word trust in relationships, because I feel like the doctors, the people in the organization, they don't feel like they need to lie to me or say something that I might want to hear because it's in their best interest to do that. And so I've got really an incredible network of just absolutely wonderful, trusting relationships. And I think if you were to talk to the people in the organization, they would go, I'm very approachable. I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to fly off the handle. I'll listen. Maybe I'll act on it or maybe I won't. But they feel like they're heard. And they feel like they can tell the truth and speak out. So I think that's a real key.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Any other questions over here?
So you talked about your hierarchy and how you tend to skip it, or
Yeah.
go directly to the phone. How do you facilitate that without stepping over the management team's toes? Because I have a partner here where I tend to overstep my ground sometimes and go directly to fixing the problem. How to do that?
Usually what I do is like, let's say it's something that involves a chief operating officer, and I go, here's who I think we need to get in the room, but of course he's there. So I don't exclude him. I don't go around him. I always would include him or the CFO or whoever. So I include them, but I don't let myself get into a thing where he goes, well, wait a minute, they report to me. I don't want you talking to them. I go, oh, that's not going to work. I mean, I get to talk to whoever I want to talk to, and I'm always going to be fair with you, and I'm going to include you, and it gets back to that trust issue, and kind of a belief that one of the things about working in a medical organization that I don't know if it's different, it's certainly different than some, is back to not being hierarchical. Dealing with doctors, you got to win the argument intellectually. If you deal from a position of force and force them to do something, there's going to be dues to pay. So you got to convince people, you got to sell your ideas, you got to persuade people. So that includes the people that work for you.
That makes sense, Dave?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Just include them, but get the right people in the room to solve the
Yeah.
problem. Okay, last question. Okay, I'll give it to Yaya.
Okay, thank you. So another thing that I got from there's so many golden nuggets, but one of the main takeaways was working with the best and giving the best to the best, right? The quality. So I'm in a season in my life where I'm transitioning or pivoting, and I want to part of my dharma or my purpose is to help affluent families prepare their heirs for the next wealth transfer and wisdom, right? And I think now is the right time. One of my insecurities or incompetencies is I don't know who they are yet. I don't know what their world is. I don't know what keeps them up at night. I never grew up in a state of affluence, right?
Yeah.
What suggestion or advice would you give someone like me to really start building trustworthy, quality relationships if I feel, well, I'm not them, I didn't come from a family of wealth, but I really care about their children and what's going to happen because I'm concerned about the future?
So are you a state attorney?
Not necessarily. So in the wealth management space, obviously there are trust and estate plannings, and you could work on probates and all that. I see an opportunity where there is almost like a family wealth advisor, but in the sense of establishing the vision and the values to make sure that if you're creating a trust, make sure the people that you're leaving the trust to trust you, and so they don't destroy it in the next generation. So it's not so much I want to get my, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, but I could partner up and create a group of that sense. But I want to be almost like that.
Like a counselor.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so, that really is psychology and reading people. There's a person that used to live out here that was on the faculty at USC in the business school, and that's what he did. And it's a fascinating job. I mean, he was telling me one time there's a very wealthy family out in the valley here. They owned tons of land. Grandpa and Grandma built it. The son was running it, and the kid just wanted to cash in.
Yep.
And there was huge conflict. Because Grandpa and Grandma looked at the grandkids and just go, "You selfish."
Right.
I mean, do you have any idea what it took to build this empire?
Yep.
But the sweat that we put in, and you just don't care. You just want your money and want to get out.
Correct.
So I think there's a lot of psychology in that. So I don't know if there are any classes in counseling or psychology, or maybe a lot of it's just common sense. But that's a really needed service.
That's I needed to hear that.
And
Thank you. You gave me that confirmation.
if you can, get a client or two that you've been successful with, where then you've got a reference or references, that would really help.
Done. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Woo! Let's go.